As any parent knows, it is really important to help our children to make healthy food choices. I know as a father who cooks for my child, it is really critical that I introduce her to fruits and vegetables, encourage whole grains, and try to manage the amount of additional sugars. But it's hard. We do this with the goal of trying to make sure that our child is able to eat healthy once she leaves the home, that she's able to make healthy choices there. But it's not just about the future. My child is making choices even today at school and outside of school. And the question is, can we help her make those choices that are going to lead to healthy food outcomes? Do food labels on products encourage children to make healthy food choices if it indicates good ingredients? Or would labels that warn against nutrients of concern actually discourage kids from using those or consuming those products? Well, today we're going to actually explore those questions in a particular context in Chile. In 2016, the Chilean government implemented a comprehensive set of obesity prevention policies aimed at improving the food environment for children. Last year on this podcast, we actually explored how the Chilean food laws affected school food purchases. But now, today, we're going to explore how food labels are influencing youth outside of school. Welcome to the Leading Voices in Food podcast series. I'm Norbert Wilson, professor of public policy and director of the World Food Policy Center at Duke University. And now it is my pleasure to welcome back my colleagues, Gabriela Fretes, who is an associate research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI, and John Cash, who is an economist and chair of the Division of Agriculture, Food, and Environment at Tufts University at the Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Gabby and Sean, I'm excited to discuss our new paper, Front of Pack Labels and Young Consumers, an Experimental Investigation of Nutrition and Sustainability Claims in Chile, that was recently published in the journal Food Quality and Preference. It's good to have you back.
Thanks for having us, Norbert.
It's great to be here, Norbert. Thanks.
Gabby, let's begin with you. So, why look at Chile? Can you explain the focus of the Chilean labeling and food environment policies there?
Yeah, sure. So, the setting of our study, as in the previous study, was Chile, because recently the country implemented the law of food labeling and advertising, which includes three main components. The first one being mandatory front of package warning labels on packaged foods and beverages. The second one being restrictions on all forms of food marketing directed to children younger than 14 years, so including printed media, broadcast, and also all digital media. And the third component being school regulations at different levels, including preschool, elementary, and high school levels. Briefly, food manufacturers in Chile must place front of package labels on packaged foods or beverages that are high in specific nutrients of concern, including added sugars, saturated fats, sodium, and or energy. This law was implemented in 3 stages, starting in June 2016, and the last stage was implemented in June 2019. So it has been already 6 or 7 years since the full implementation of the regulation. Specifically talking about the school component, because this, it relates to children and adolescents, the law mandates that foods and beverages with at least one front of pack warning label cannot be sold, promoted, or marketed inside schools. And this includes the cafeteria, the school kiosks, and even events that are happening inside the schools. And additionally, foods and beverages that have at least one front of pack warning label cannot be offered as part of school meal programs. In addition to this front of pack warning label regulation, Chile also implemented voluntary eco-labels starting in 2022 that provide information about the recyclability of food packages specifically. There is a certification process behind this labeling regulation, and the eco-label can be displayed if the food or beverage package is at least 80% recyclable.
Wow, this is a really comprehensive set of policies to encourage healthier food choices both at the school and then also outside of the school. I'm excited to discuss further what this may do to food choices among children. But, Sean, that really brings up the question, why is it important to look at young consumers and their food choices, and what makes them unique compared to adults?
Thanks for asking, Norbert. This is an area where I've been interested for a while. Young consumers play a crucial role in shaping the demand for food and long-term dietary habits. And young consumers might be more open to incorporating dietary advice into those long-term habits than adults might be. Just perhaps kids are less set in their ways. Children and adolescents are both current but also future consumers with growing autonomy in what they choose around food as they get older. To marketers, we sometimes would say they might represent a 3-in-1 market. First, they spend their own money on snacks, what you could think of as the primary market. And how children spend money autonomously is really something that hasn't been studied enough by researchers, although it's an area where I've tried to make a contribution. Second, kids influence household purchases. This is sometimes called pester power. You can think of the kid in the supermarket begging a parent to buy a favorite snack or a certain brand of cereal. But this can also be more socially positive in that kids might be agents of change within their households, encouraging perhaps other family members to buy healthier food items if they get more interested in that. And third, this 3-in-1 market is rounded out by the fact that children represent future purchasing power as future adults. So the habits that they're forming now might influence what they do when they're older. Despite this importance for marketers, but also for pro-social behavior change, there really hasn't been a lot of research on youth food purchasing behaviors. And this question that we are looking at here of how kids might respond to front of package labels has been particularly limited. So in this project, we wanted to understand how Chilean adolescents might respond both to nutrition warning labels, but also eco labels, and how they consider price when choosing snacks. So we were lucky to be able to recruit a sample of over 300 kids aged 10 to 14 to participate in these experiments. I know we're going to chat a bit more about what we found, but in general, our results suggest that while price is perhaps the biggest factor in explaining what the kids chose in our experiment, that some of these youth showed preferences for the eco labels, which could be indicative of an emerging interest in sustainability issues. But overall, understanding these behaviors is really important because the food choices made during childhood and adolescence can persist in adulthood, and this can be really something that helps change long-term health outcomes.
Gabby, let's talk a little bit more about eco labels for a moment. What are they, and how do these eco labels influence children's snack choices? What do they tell us about their awareness of sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question, Norbert. Thanks. So in our study specifically, we found that eco-labels had a greater influence on adolescents' snack choices than nutrition warning labels, these black and white octagons that are displayed on the front of the package of products in Chile. And this suggests that some young consumers are becoming more aware of environmental issues, or at least in our sample. One possible explanation for this could be that eco-labels suggest positive emotions rather than warnings, as with the nutrition labels, which might feel more restrictive. Unlike the nutrition labels that tell consumers what not to eat, eco-labels, on the other hand, highlight a product's benefits, making it more appealing. So this could be one of the reasons. Related to that, adolescents may also associate eco-friendly products with social responsibility, aligning with increasing youth-driven environmental movements that are very prevalent around the world. However, not all adolescents in our sample responded equally to the eco-labels that were presented to them in the snacks. Our study specifically found that those who received pocket money were more likely to choose eco-label snacks. And this could be possibly because they have more autonomy over their purchases and their personal values could be playing a bigger role in their choices. If eco-labels are really influencing children and adolescents' food choices, one intervention that could be potentially beneficial could be to incorporate sustainability messaging in school food and nutrition education in order to reinforce those positive behaviors and make them part of the daily food choices that they make. In making sustainable food more affordable, government incentives or retailer promotions could encourage youth to choose more eco-friendly snacks, given that price, as we saw in our study, remains a key factor for choice. Lastly, not all eco-labels are created equal, and this suggests that clear standardization and regulation are needed to prevent misleading claims and ensure that adolescents receive accurate information about the sustainability of their food choices. Ultimately, the eco-labeling, of course, is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all the environmental issues, but it represents a promising tool to nudge consumers toward better dietary and environmental behaviors.
Gabby, you talked about how the eco labels have a bigger effect than nutrition warning. And overall, the nutrition warning labels didn't really have that big of an effect on snack food choices. Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, so this was really one surprising finding in our study, that front of pack nutrition warning labels did not significantly impact children's and adolescents' snack choices. And this kind of contradicts some previous research suggesting that warning labels can help consumers make healthier choices. And there are several possible explanations for why this could be happening. The first one could be just lack of interest. So, compared to adults, children and adolescents may be just more responsive to positive rather than negative messaging, because negative messages related to nutrition might not seem relevant to them because they feel healthy in the present. So they just are not interested in those kind of messages. The second could be label fatigue. So we discussed this in our paper, and basically it's because Chile's regulation was already introduced in 2016. So given that it has been already some time since the implementation, young consumers may have become habituated to seeing the warning labels on food products. So like how adults also experience label fatigue, and this is documented in the evidence, children and adolescents might no longer pay attention or pay less attention to the warnings. Third possible explanation is it relates to taste and brand loyalty. For this point, research shows that for youth, specifically, taste remains the top priority when they choose food, so often outweighing any other factors, including health concerns. So if a favorite snack, for example, has warning labels but remains tasty and familiar to the kid, the label alone may not discourage them from choosing that snack. And lastly, social and environmental factors. So our study found, as we already mentioned, that eco-labels had a stronger influence than nutrition warnings, and this could indicate that children and adolescents are just more responsive to messages about sustainability than to warnings, which they may perceive as less immediate.
Thank you for sharing that. And at this moment in the US, there is a conversation about front of pack labels. And the work that you are showing in this paper may even point to some of the things that may happen if we see similar front of pack labels here in the US. So I'll be looking forward to see what happens with that effort right now. Sean, I want to turn to you and ask an economist type question. What role does price play in adolescent food choices? Not only price, but the availability of pocket money. And how do you think that should influence policy?
Our study shows that price is the most significant factor influencing the snack choices of the kids in our study. And higher prices definitely reduce the likelihood of seeing a certain product being selected. It was kind of interesting. Interestingly, this effect was consistent regardless of whether the kids regularly received pocket money, suggests that even those that don't receive spending money still are paying attention to price. And this was a little bit different from what we found in some other studies that I've been able to work on in the US and Germany that suggested that previous experience with pocket money or getting an allowance was really important for understanding which kids might be most careful about spending their own money. I don't know if that's something different in the Chilean context than those other contexts, or if that was just about what the kids in this particular study were paying attention to because we were asking about different things. But when we look more closely at the kids in our Chilean study, we found some important differences. As Gabi already mentioned, those kids who received pocket money were the ones who were more positively inclined to choosing products with the eco labels. And that suggests that they might be valuing sustainability a little bit more when making their own choices, perhaps because they're already a little bit more familiar with some of those dynamics of spending their own money. Whereas those without pocket money were more likely to choose cheaper options or sometimes the healthier options like the apples that we provided as an option in our study, and suggesting they're focused more on affordability or health. So what this means for policy, given the strong influence of price, it means that policy interventions that focus on price, like taxes on unhealthy foods or perhaps subsidies for healthier options, might be effective tools in guiding better choices for these kids. But also programs promoting budgeting skills and food literacy might help adolescents make more informed decisions, both about the nutrition and the sustainability of the foods they're eating. Finally, since some kids are responding positively to eco labels, integrating sustainability messages with the nutrition education could enhance the impact of food labeling policies. Overall, combining price policies, education, labeling strategies could be really effective in driving meaningful changes in children and adolescent food choices.
Sean, thank you. And it's really important to appreciate the differences that may occur when we think about a country like Chile versus the US, or in some of your other work in Germany, and understanding that youth culture may be different and may be shaping these behaviors, but it's very clear that all people, it sounds like, are responding to price. And that's a constant that we're seeing here. Sean, here's my final question for you. What is the take-home implications of this study?
Well, first and foremost, our findings here suggest that nutrition labeling alone isn't necessarily going to be enough to drive healthier choices among children and adolescents. It can be part of an answer, but policymakers looking to promote healthier food choices might need to complement labeling with education campaigns that reinforce the meaning of these warnings and integrate them into school-based nutrition programs. That said, I think that Chile has already been a leader in this regard because the food items that get the warning labels in the Chilean context are the same ones that are subject to different restrictions on marketing or sales in schools as well. So I do think that we're going to see kids and eventually adults just become more familiar with these categorizations because of the consistency in the Chilean law. Also, on the eco-label side, leveraging that kind of eco-labeling alongside nutrition messaging might be an effective combination to help promote both healthier and more sustainable food choices. And finally, we've been talking about new front-of-pack labeling schemes here in the United States, and it's really important to make sure we learn as much as possible from the experiences with such policies in other countries. Chile has really been a world leader in this regard, and so I'm very happy to have tried to contribute to an understanding of how people use these labels through this study and through some of the other projects that Gabi, you, and I have all been involved in.
This is a great place to stop. So, Gabi, Sean, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, Norbert. This has been great.
Thanks for having us, Norbert.
So today our guests are Gabriela Fretes of the International Food Policy Research Institute and Sean Cash of Tufts University. I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for paying attention to this wonderful podcast series. I want to also thank Deborah Hill, who is our producer. This is Norbert Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Leading Voices in Food podcast. This program is an educational series produced by Duke University's World Food Policy Center with the goal of promoting productive conversation for food systems change. If you would like to subscribe, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or your favorite podcast app. Transcripts are also available on the website of the Duke World Food Policy Center.